I want to give you a personal testimony of a savage storm that I went through. I have debated.
There is a moment in every person's life when the walls they've built around their certainty begin to crack. For most people, that moment happens in private, quietly, away from the eyes of the world. But for one of the most powerful voices in American Christianity, that moment happened in front of thousands, and it changed everything. John Hagee grew up in Baytown, Texas, in a home where faith was not just practiced, it was breathed. Born on April 12, 1940, he was raised by a father who served as a devoted minister, and family evenings often centered around reading and living out the teachings of the Bible. Those early moments planted something deep inside him, a conviction that he was meant to serve, a calling that would one day carry him from a small Texas town to the national stage. In school, Hagee stood out for his determination and his sharp academic drive. He went on to Trinity University in San Antonio, earning a Bachelor of Science degree, then a Master's in Education from the University of North Texas. His education sharpened both his intellect and his spiritual devotion, preparing him for the ministry he believed he was destined to lead. His pastoral journey began in 1966 when he founded a small church in San Antonio. What started modestly grew rapidly under his leadership. By 1975, he established Cornerstone Church, which would eventually become one of the largest churches in the entire country. More than 22,000 members, a vast campus, a community that stretched far beyond Sunday mornings. Beyond the pulpit, Hagee expanded his reach through John Hagee Ministries, in broadcasting his sermons across hundreds of radio and television stations. He also founded Christians United for Israel, one of the most prominent pro-Israel organizations in the nation, reflecting his deep belief that faith and public life were never meant to be separated. For decades, he preached with a kind of fire that made people feel the ground shifting beneath their feet. His voice carried certainty. His convictions were unshakable. His boldness became his brand, and his followers loved him for it. But bold men make bold moves, and bold moves invite bold opposition. Hagee's unwavering conservative stance pulled him into controversy again and again throughout his career. In his 2006 book, Jerusalem Countdown, he warned that Iran would trigger a major conflict foretold in Scripture. His supporters viewed it as prophetic insight, but his critics accused him of spreading fear and fueling hostility toward an entire religion. The debate was fierce, and it did not die quickly. More turbulence followed. In 2008, comments he made suggesting that the Holocaust played a role in God's plan to establish the nation of Israel sparked immediate and widespread outrage. Though his intention was to honor Israel's founding, many found the statement deeply painful, arguing it minimized one of the greatest tragedies in human history. The fallout was significant. Alliances were strained. His reputation took a serious hit. Yet, even through that storm, his congregation stood by him. To them, he was a man willing to say the difficult thing, to speak what others refused to speak, regardless of the consequences. His firm positions on social issues, opposing same-sex marriage, and taking a hard stance on LGBTQ rights, standing firmly against abortion, made him one of the most polarizing figures in modern American religion. Activists opposed him, supporters championed him, and the debate around his name rarely cooled. But here is what the world did not see. Behind the powerful sermons and the public battles was a man walking through his own private storms. In 1975, his marriage to Martha Downing ended. For a pastor in a conservative Christian community, that was not just a personal loss, it was a public wound. The backlash was immediate and painful. Many questioned his credibility. Some in his own church turned against him. His ministry nearly crumbled under the weight of public judgment. There were people who genuinely wondered whether he would ever recover. But Hagee refused to let failure write the final word over his life. He rebuilt. He pushed forward. He later married Diana Castro, a woman he has described as his greatest source of strength. Not just his wife, but his closest partner in everything he was building. With her beside him, he found a renewed sense of purpose and pressed deeper into his calling. Still, the pressure of leading a church that size never fully lifted. Carrying the expectations of thousands of people means there is never a moment where weakness is allowed, never a Sunday where you can walk to that pulpit and say, "I don't have the answer today." For years, Hagee carried that weight quietly, wrestling privately with questions he never brought into the light. That is, until the morning everything changed. Earlier this year, during a regular Sunday service at Cornerstone Church, John Hagee stepped to the pulpit and did something no one in that room expected. The congregation had come for the same experience they had always known: a bold message, a confident voice, a preacher who spoke with the authority of someone who had already figured it out. What they got instead was something far more powerful. His tone was different from the first word. The fire was still there, but beneath it was something softer. Something that felt like a man who had been in a long conversation with himself and was finally ready to share what had come out of it. He began by saying that a lifetime of studying Scripture had taught him something he had not anticipated, that sometimes parts of God's plan are simply beyond what any human mind can fully grasp. The sanctuary went silent. This was the man people had looked to for decades for clear, definitive answers. And here he was, standing at the front of his own church, acknowledging that certainty has its limits. He went on to say that his relentless pursuit of absolute answers had sometimes blinded him to something deeper, the mystery that lives at the very heart of genuine faith. He told his congregation that for years he had tried to explain every detail, to map every prophecy, to give people the kind of clarity that left no room for doubt. But that morning, he said something that cut through the room like a quiet thunder. Faith is not always about answers. Sometimes it is about accepting the unknown and trusting that God knows even when we do not. For many in that room, the moment was unlike anything they had experienced in that church before. One attendee said she had never felt so connected to him. Hearing him admit that even he wrestles with uncertainty made her feel less alone in her own questions. Another said it reminded her that faith is not a destination. It is a daily walk full of questions that may never be fully answered in this lifetime. But not everyone in that room felt comfort. Some felt unsettled. Hagee's confidence had been the anchor for a lot of people over a lot of years. Hearing him speak about mystery and uncertainty left some wondering what they were supposed to hold on to now. One long-time congregant put it simply: "We came to him for clarity. Now he is asking us to sit with the questions." That is not easy. And yet, whether it brought comfort or created questions, no one in that room could deny that something real had just happened. Something authentic. Something that felt less like a performance and more like a confession. For theologians and religious scholars watching from the outside, Hagee's shift carried serious weight. It was not just an aging preacher softening his tone. It pointed to something deeper. a theological evolution, a move from absolute declarations toward a more humble, more human understanding of what faith actually asks of us. Scholars noted that this kind of shift often marks the deepest stage of spiritual maturity, the place where a leader stops needing to be right and starts being real. His message reached far beyond the walls of Cornerstone Church. It spread online, traveled through conversations between pastors, sparked discussion in seminary classrooms, and resonated with ordinary people who had quietly been struggling with their own spiritual questions for years. Younger Christians especially connected with it. One young woman said it showed her that it is okay not to have every answer, that faith is a journey, not a finish line. Even in political circles where Hagee has long been a significant voice, the change in his tone raised new questions. Some wondered whether this shift in the way he spoke about faith might eventually influence how religious leaders engage with public life, whether the era of absolute certainty as a political tool in Christian circles might be slowly giving way to something more reflective. But perhaps what was most striking about that Sunday morning was not what Hagee said. It was the moment after he said it. When the service ended, while he stepped back from the pulpit with a calm, quiet expression. No dramatic declaration, no thunderous close, just a steady, reflective man who had said what he needed to say and was now at peace with it. He once said in an interview, "I just kept reading the Bible. I didn't know what else to do. I kept reading, hoping it would go away." That one line reveals more about the man than almost anything else in his public life. It shows a person who, in the middle of his own crisis, reached for the one thing he had always reached for, and found not answers, but something better. A reason to keep going. At 85 years old, after decades of building, preaching, fighting, falling, rebuilding, and leading, John Hagee gave his congregation and the world something that no prophecy chart or political alliance ever could. He gave them his honesty, and he reminded every person watching that the strongest people are not the ones who never question. They are the ones who question and choose to trust anyway. His sermons have shaped millions. His books have filled shelves across the country. His advocacy has left a mark on American religious and political life that will not disappear quietly. But it is possible that this moment, this unexpected, quiet, deeply human moment, will outlast all of it. Because in a world that rewards confidence and punishes doubt, a man standing at the peak of his influence and saying, "I don't have all the answers, but I trust God anyway," is not a sign of weakness. It is the most powerful thing he has ever said.